Thomas Akoh Etuh is a very rich man. He is the chairman at Veritas Capital Assurance plc and founder of the TAC Group of companies, a multi-billion naira conglomerate spanning agriculture, logistics, asset management, aviation and mining. His portfolio includes TAC Continental Limited, TAC Asset Management, TAC Agro, TAC Aviation, Thomas and Associates Limited UK, and Cape Cross Salt of Namibia. Like many Nigerians of such considerable means, he has made the jump from bank customer to bank insider, becoming the pioneer vice chairman of the Unity Bank Board of Directors in April 2014. A little under a year later, in January 2015, the Central Bank of Nigeria approved his appointment as the chairman. What happened during the 33 months from his appointment on January 23, 2015 to his retirement on October 4, 2017 will become a case study in regulatory malpractice, absence of compliance, and the sheer unbridled greed of well-connected insiders in Nigeria's financial system. Along the way, a previously healthy bank would find itself completely hollowed out after giving out hundreds of billions of naira in non-performing loans, reduced to meticulously cooking its books while secretly operating with negative share capital for the better part of a decade. A barely disguised distressed sale to a younger competitor would then be floated as the solution to the bank's woes, even as its erstwhile chairman would continue to lavish stupendous amounts of money on his personal business interests. Other people's money. Former American bank regulator William Black famously wrote a book about the 1980s US savings and loans crisis called "The Best Way to Rob a Bank is to Own One." In the book, he detailed how the average run-of-the-mill successful bank robbery net an average of $7,500 alongside the risk of a bullet to the chest, whereas a moderately competent bank executive could make many multiples of that sum using just two basic principles of accounting fraud: compliance fraud and issuance of so-called liar's loans. When the goal is a heist, the idea behind the two-pronged approach is simple but effective. Compliance fraud entails lowering internal controls and restrictions that normally limit the bank's exposure to high-risk activity such as subprime lending. Doing this allows the bank to vastly increase its loan portfolio in a short time and thus report incredible levels of growth, at least in the short term. Working hand in glove with this is the increased issuance of liar's loans, that is, loans that are issued with little or no due diligence by the bank, effectively taking the borrower at their word, which is something a bank is never supposed to do. According to Black, there are always three outcomes whenever this financial formula is put into action. First, the bank experiences incredible growth in the short term and may be able to report an impressive balance sheet performance. Next, Black says, the top-ranking executives at the bank become stupendously wealthy. Finally, the bank itself suffers catastrophic financial failure that causes its collapse if it is not bailed out or taken over. According to sources from within Unity Bank, Thomas Akoh appears to have treated Black's formula as an instruction manual rather than a warning, and the inevitable disastrous outcome is now imminent. Akoh, according to these sources, was single-handedly responsible during his tenure for inflating the bank's number of non-performing loans to over 20,000, coming to a total NPN balance of more than 400 billion naira by the time he retired. Of this unfathomable number, at least 7 companies directly owned by or linked to Akoh alone were responsible for more than 29 billion naira worth of NPLs that would later be wiped off the books using financial sleight of hand. The following images are excerpts from large data files passed across to West Africa Weekly containing the comprehensive lists of NPLs shortly before Eto's retirement from the board. The companies left unredacted are all companies directly owned by or beneficially linked to Thomas Akoh. Fertilizer and Chemical Limited, TAC Agro and Chemicals Limited, SDEM Erectors Nigeria Limited, Northeast Goldcom Limited, Keptin Fertile Acres Limited, Yam International Limited, and TAC Continental Limited are some of the Akoh-linked entities on this list of NPLs, as identified by bank insiders to West Africa Weekly. Entities linked to Etuh alone were responsible for a double-digit percentage of all non-performing loans on the bank's books. Recognizing that this will become a problem, Etuh's next move was either evil genius or just plain evil, depending on your perspective. In December 2016, Unity Bank, under his leadership, struck a sales agreement with a company called Frontier Capital Alternative Assets Limited, that is FCAAL, to offload its total NPL portfolio, which was then worth 242 billion naira, for the sum of 6.43 billion. FCAAL, by the way, is also closely linked to Etuh, according to sources at the bank. What this means is that after personally taking nearly 30 billion naira out of the bank whose board he chaired, in the process inflating its NPL portfolio well past every regulatory limit in Nigerian jurisprudence, Thomas Akoh and his associates at FCAAL would then use a fraction of what he took out of the bank to buy its loan portfolio, worth approximately 37.6 times more than what they paid for it. In addition, all collateral used to secure these loans were also taken over by FCAAL in the deal, making it a double loss for Unity Bank and a double gain for Etuh and FCAAL. But he wasn't done yet. The sales agreement was modified in May 2017 to account for, among other things, the expected value of the NPL portfolio by the end of that year. At the stroke of a pen, the value of the loan portfolio sold to FCAAL went up 44% to 436 billion 751 million 633,476 naira 96 kobo. But the price paid by FCAAL did not change. Thomas Akoh had successfully masterminded the obliteration of nearly 500 billion naira worth of wealth from the Nigerian banking system in exchange for the risible sum of 6 billion naira. Explaining why this is an especially bad deal, a source who asked not to be named said this: "It is important to point out that the sale of Unity Bank loans to Frontier was under the pretense that it was helping the NPL position of the bank. That is far from the truth, because Thomas Akoh, who is responsible for the majority of the NPLs, has created fresh NPLs in the book. The major reason for the sale was to cover up the huge NPL belonging to Thomas Akoh. Note also that the loans and collaterals were grossly undervalued, with no reasonable revenue generated from the sale. Moreover, the sale eroded the bank's capital, throwing it deeply into the red. In addition, Frontier Capital has made very little recovery, most of which were at ridiculous concessions, because they did not pay any reasonable considerations for the loans." Now, the problem with all this was that regardless of whatever accounting shenanigans could be enacted to hide the fact that Unity Bank was nearly 500 billion naira in the hole due to compliance, fraud, and large loans, this kind of leakage could not be hidden for long. It was bound to show up on the books eventually and result in the first bank run in Nigeria since the January 2006 collapse of SGBN. Certainly, if the bank were being audited by the likes of PwC or KPMG, such gaping holes in the balance sheets could not be hidden for long. Which perhaps makes it rather interesting that the bank's long-standing auditor turned out to be a little-known audit firm in Kano called Ahmed Zakari & Co. The image on your screen is the firm's Lagos office. Feel free to draw your own conclusions. Explaining the ongoing conspiracy of silence at Unity Bank, a current staff member with knowledge of the matter said, "With this criminal sale of the bank's assets, the bank's shareholders' funds became negative to the tune of about 270 billion naira. The bank has been operating with huge negative capital for several years. The Banks and Other Financial Institutions Act, BOFIA 2020, and the CBN's Prudential Guidelines contain multiple clauses that criminalize pretty much everything described earlier. The Prudential Guidelines, for example, state that the maximum amount that can be given as a loan to a single borrower or group of related borrowers is 20% of the bank's shareholders' funds. Thomas Akoh himself claims that Unity Bank's shareholders' funds stood at 31 billion naira when he took charge, going up to 80 billion naira by the time he left. Putting aside the whistleblowers' insistence that Unity Bank has in fact been running with negative shareholders' funds since 2016, if we are able to use his own dodgy math, his NPL portfolio of 29 billion naira grossly exceeds the prudential guidelines, both in the case of 31 billion naira shareholders funds, in which case he would be responsible for 93.5%, and in the case of 80 billion naira shareholders funds, in which he would be responsible for 36.25%. For some unspecified reason, both the management and board of Unity Bank showed complete disregard for these regulations and continued to grant loans to Thomas Akoh in amounts far in excess of these regulatory limits. The CBN, meanwhile, appears to have entirely vacated its regulatory position where Unity Bank is concerned. According to staff who are in the know, the bank's treasurer, Sonny Bakunye, was indicted by a high-level committee within the bank for fraudulently diverting 13 billion naira belonging to the bank. The recommendation in the committee's report was that he should be sacked and the 13 billion naira immediately recovered. For an unknown reason, sources informed West Africa Weekly that this recommendation was never carried out by the managing director, and the treasurer remains not just a free man, but also retains his job to this day. Moreover, the inside word is that as the CBN continues to sit on its hands instead of regulating Unity Bank properly, the risk factor for contagion is growing within the Nigerian financial system due to Thomas Etuh's insatiable appetite for toxic non-performing loans. The following memo to the board of the bank, signed by the managing director and other officials, shows that Thomas Akoh has recently been granted new loans totaling about 10 billion naira by the bank he quite literally ate into the red. Once again, the approval for this loan was given with no questions asked. And in case you are in any doubt about who exactly is behind this Lighthouse Capital Limited, the following CAC documents should clear that up. Worst of all, as confirmed by several sources, there is a plan afoot to cover up all these financial atrocities at Unity Bank by going into a merger with Providus Bank. This move is apparently being spearheaded by Thomas Akoh himself, with support from some allies of his at the central bank. Ahead of any proposed merger involving Unity Bank, the CBN, the NDIC, and the EFCC must carry out certain investigations to answer the following questions, failing which they might be exposing the Nigerian financial system to potentially catastrophic contagion. What is the exact value of insider non-performing loans covered up in the sale to Frontier Capital? Why was the 13 billion naira fraud by the treasurer covered up? And why were the recommendations of the committee never implemented? Why and how has Unity Bank continued to operate with negative shareholders funds till date? What is the role of the auditor in keeping this fraud going? What is the true status of new loans granted to Thomas Akoh by Unity Bank? Have they become non-performing loans? Are there other directors of Unity Bank who are beneficiaries of these loans to Thomas Akoh, which is an incentive for their continued breach of the regulatory limit on insider loans?